I maintain it's this. If we lose our First Amendment rights and our freedom of speech, we have lost everything and nothing else matters.
This is your daily dose of all things royal.
I believe it was you, Mr. Farage, that said COVID changed our world. And in many ways, more than just a biological disease, what it did to us psychologically, governmentally, philosophically was really bad. And we're still not out of it yet because of what happened then. We're losing our freedoms. We are losing our freedoms. And it's not because of an American Congress. It's not because of American courts. It's not because of American Republicans. And I'm going to even say it's not because of American Democrats. It is due to bureaucrats in Brussels and in London, and in other places as well. It's wrong. It's un-American. I am unabashedly, and I think we all are here, hopefully, pro-American. We should be protecting our citizens. Instead, we're watching foreign bureaucrats come to our country and try to force United States companies to censor humor, satire, and news they don't like. It's backwards, it's bizarre, it's perverse, and it's weird. That's what we would call it in New Jersey. It's just weird, and it's not good. It's the opposite of everything that the United States of America fought for and stands for. And it's a globalist mindset. You know, we can all talk about the issues, but I'm going to keep talking about globalism versus American exceptionalism and individuality. I believe very much, sincerely, that the whole battle that's going on now with the right and the left, what's happening in Great Britain, what's happening around the world, what's happening in the United States, is very much that argument. Individuality, and in our case here in the States, Americanism, exceptionalism, or is it globalism? And like the EU's Digital Service Act and the UK's Online Safety Act are the pinnacle examples, and they are, of how upside down things have gotten in the effort to globalize our society. And that is the ultimate showdown. It is resulting in our losing of our freedom, losing our influence, and the only winner here are some countries in Europe, Russia, China, and others. Europe is spending their time attacking American tech companies, dictating how our platforms operate, how our technology operates, and punishing people for exhibiting free speech. The European model, I'm sorry if I offend anyone, but it is wrong. We fought a revolution to defend ourselves. Men and women pledged their lives, their treasure, their sacred honor, so that they wouldn't have to go through this. And we never thought that Americans would be stripped of that. That's why this moment is so serious. It's more serious than most Americans and people realize right now. And you know, for generations, we thought if we were ever attacked, it was going to be a nuclear holocaust. We thought it was going to be the domino theory. We thought it was going to be world wars. We thought it was so many things. I maintain it's this. If we lose our First Amendment rights and our freedom of speech, we have lost everything and nothing else matters. And internet technology is being used as a vehicle to make this happen. So I have a question for Mr. Farage and Mr. Price. This hearing is really good, and I'm sure we're going to have some other hearings. But more than hearings and talking about it, what is it tangibly, this is a hard question, that we can do to stop it? What is it? Mr. Farage, I'll start with you.
The debate we've had here, I mean, nobody here from any side of the debate has told me that the Online Safety Act is a wonderful piece of legislation. You know, right across the spectrum here, you're having your own internal debates about free speech in America, right, healthy, and what this committee is for. I want to make this argument. Yeah, I know these companies are very big and very powerful, many of the tech firms, but you know, governments talk to each other, yeah? And it needs the American administration and businesses to have an honest conversation. Brussels, you won't get a hearing. They are fundamentally anti-American, frankly, and I was there for 20 years, I saw it. I do think there is a conversation to be had with the British government about the shape of their legislation and the impact it can have on American individuals, their liberty, and American companies. So I am calling for, as a result of what's happened, it's clearly got, the legislation's clearly doing the wrong thing. I think it is cause for proper intergovernmental debate.
I hope that we have it. And by the way, we have censorship in America. Watch ABC, NBC, and CBS. I'm at the meetings. I'm at a discussion. I see and hear what happens. I watch, my wife has Channel 6 on, which drives me nuts at home, and it has nothing to do with the damn stuff that actually happened. And that's the truth. We have it already, and I pray to God we don't lose America. Mr. Chairman, indulgence, and I'll shut up. Mr. Price didn't get a chance.
Quickly. Yes, sir. You talked about putting pressure on, and I agree that Brussels is a cold house for free speech. But a lot of the regulations actually happening in my own country, in Ireland, in Dublin, where a lot of the tech companies are headquartered, their European headquarters. And it's the Irish Media Commission, or Commission na Meán in the Irish language, which is the ground zero really for a lot of this regulation. And here's where I think the US can do a lot, because there's strong bilateral relationships between Ireland and the United States, is to put pressure on the Irish government to stop the bullying of tech companies. And already X is in the Irish Supreme Court soon against the Irish Media Commissioner. So they're already starting the crackdown. So I would hope that you use your good offices here to put pressure on the Irish.
Mr. Chairman, I have a point of parliamentary inquiry.
Gentleman is recognized.
Why is the witness leaving this hearing early, and certainly without?
He has an engagement he told us about. This is not unusual. It's happened before under Democrat leadership of the committee, under Republican leadership of the committee. We're trying to get through as many people as we can. You've had many of your witnesses who did not ask Mr. Farage a question. Many of your colleagues, if you could have coordinated with them, you didn't go in order. We didn't necessarily go in order because we wanted to get as many people up front asking Mr. Farage questions.
Could we ask him if he would be willing to stay for a little bit?
It's totally up to the witness, but if the witness has to go somewhere, I understand. We were glad that he came. We were glad that we had a chance to visit with him in Europe. So you could have went on that trip and had a chance to interact with him.
I wasn't invited, but next time.
Oh, you were definitely invited. Everyone was invited from the Democrat side. The whole committee was invited. The chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Georgia for questions. And Mr. Farage, if you can stay longer, we would definitely welcome that.
When I chaired this event in the Palace of Westminster, we had an hour for it because time was very tight, and that was perhaps the source of a slight disagreement Mr. Raskin and I had.
A little bit of confusion on that.
We would have given this.
Each side got an hour, but the whole thing was limited to an hour. And then your side went, and then you called it off.
I was given the instructions. This we've given 3 hours, and I apologize, but no, I can't stay longer.
Okay.
I could send the Constitution down to the White House for the president to read it.
The gentleman is not recognized. The gentlelady from Georgia has 5 minutes to ask her questions while Mr. Farage is still here, and then he will leave when he has to leave. Dear Mr. Musk, I am writing to you in the context of recent events in the United Kingdom and in relation to the planned broadcast on your platform, X, of a live conversation between a U.S. presidential candidate and yourself. So think about it. The guy in Europe in charge of enforcing a European Union law writes an American about an American company, about an American election, and he says the context for the letter, the reason for the letter are events that are happening in the UK, a non-European Union country. That's not Europe trying to influence what happens here. I don't know what is. He goes on throughout the letter and says this: measures need to be taken to combat disinformation. He told this to Mr. Musk. We're concerned about any, quote, illegal content you may have. And he ends his letter by saying, my services and I, very last sentence, my services and I will be extremely vigilant to any evidence that points to breaches of the Digital Services Act and will not hesitate to make full use of our toolbox. So he ends the letter with a threat. So before the interview even takes place, he's threatening an American running an American company about an interview regarding the most important election we have, election of the President of the United States. And again, saying the reason for doing so are events that are happening in a non-European Union country, the UK. Comments about events happening in the UK. Concerned about this, quote, spillover effect. That is why we're having today's hearing. That's why we went to Europe last month, or actually in July, to study this issue. Now, here's what's interesting. Mr. Breton, after he sends this letter, this committee sent him 2 letters, and then he suddenly resigns. We asked him to come today, but he refused to come. We asked him to send written testimony. He refused to do that. We asked him to appear. He just wouldn't come. I think it's important to remember what the House Judiciary Committee did last Congress. We investigated our government, the Biden administration, their attacks on free expression here in the United States. What Michael Schellenberger journalists called the censorship industrial complex. Big government, big tech, big media, big academia, all working together to censor Americans. And we learned all kinds of things in that investigation. We learned on April 27th of 2022 that the Biden administration had established a disinformation governance board. That's right. A bunch of bureaucrats going to get together and tell you what you can say, what you can tweet, what you can post, what you can read, what's misinformation, what's disinformation, and the new term they come up, what's malinformation. Thank goodness, because many of us raised concerns about that, they disbanded that disinformation governance board. We no longer had that. We heard from journalists like Mr. Schellenberger, like Matt Taibbi, regarding the Twitter files. We heard from Tulsi Gabbard. We heard from RFK Jr., all Democrats, frankly. In fact, I took some heat for that. What are you doing bringing Democrats in front of the judiciary? We brought them in because they care about the First Amendment. It was interesting. When RFK Jr. came in to testify, the Democrats actually made a motion to go to executive session. Kick everyone out. No journalists, no one was allowed. They wanted to kick everyone out, go to executive session so no one could hear what RFK Jr. was going to testify to in a hearing on censorship. You can't make this stuff up. We learned that on January 23rd. Think about that, by the way. We learned on January 23rd, 2021, maybe point this one out first, that there was an email. So the third day of the Biden administration, there was an email sent from the White House to Twitter which said, take down this tweet ASAP. And who had issued the tweet? Who had put out the tweet? RFK Jr. So you had the Biden administration trying to censor a fellow Democrat who was going to run against him in the Democrat primary. I mean, that is, and everything in that tweet actually were true statements. So we learned all that last year, and of course our investigation culminated with a letter from Mr. Zuckerberg on August 26, 2024 last year, where he said, yes, the Biden administration pressured us to censor. We did it. We're sorry, and we won't do it again. And Meta, Facebook, has now subsequently changed policy. They now go to the community notes policy instead of the, quote, independent fact checker approach that was being used before. We had one other witness last Congress, journalist from Canada, Rupa Subramanya, who I thought said something that was really important. She said, free speech is a core value of Western culture. And that is true, and that's what our concern is. We're concerned about the attacks on free expression in Europe, the censorship, the arrest for offensive posts, the chilling effect it all has on speech. But we're more concerned, frankly, as Americans, about the limits the DSA, the Online Safety Act in the UK, put on Americans' First Amendment rights, and the shakedown. And I think that's the appropriate term, the shakedown of American tech companies under the DSA, the OSA, and the Digital Marketing Act Digital Markets Act in the European Union. These acts target our tech companies that provide the modern town square, and they are the engines of innovation in our global economy. Since the turn of the century, European tech companies have languished behind their American counterparts. European governments have tried everything to change this except what might actually work, deregulating their own economy and letting free enterprise flourish. Instead of cutting red tape and allowing their own companies to innovate and grow, the EU and the UK are going after American companies that have grown to dominate the global tech landscape. Regulations like the EU's Digital Markets Act and the UK's Digital Markets Competition and Consumers Act impose burdensome requirements on US tech companies while leaving their European counterparts untouched. But these attacks on American companies won't result in a so-called European champion. Instead, China wins as Europe hurts both itself and America. They make the user experience worse. They distort the digital marketplace by allowing less innovative and less efficient foreign competitors to simply steal from U.S. tech companies. In addition to attacking American tech companies, Europe is attacking free speech around the world, including here in America. Laws like the Digital Services Act and the Online Safety Act are the engines of global censorship regime targeting political speech disfavored by European bureaucrats. The censorship mechanism is simple. The DSA and the OSA effectively require social media platforms to change their terms of service to moderate more content. These companies have one set of standards that they apply globally because it's costly, impractical, and harmful to user privacy to change content moderation rules based on a user's location. So when platforms are forced to change their terms of service to comply with European laws, it affects what we see, what we read, what we say online here in America, infringing on Americans' First Amendment rights. And this is no accident. Even the New York Times, The Atlantic have acknowledged that these foreign censorship laws are intended to have global impact. And European actions have proven it. Again, just look at Mr. Breton's letter. Supporters say these laws make the online environment safer for children, something that we all agree with. We all want to protect kids. But censorship laws are never about disinformation or child safety or anything else. They're always about censoring criticism of the government. Social media is a relatively new technology, but censorship is as old as time. Misinformation, disinformation, hate speech labels are always used by the people in power to censor their critics. And my experience has taught me that today's misinformation is tomorrow's truth. And we have seen it time and time again. I always like to point out, everything the government told us about COVID turned out to be wrong. Everything our government told us about COVID. I'm not even talking about Europe here. Everything. They told us that the virus didn't come from a lab. Sure looks like it did. They told us it wasn't gain-of-function research done at the lab. Yes, it was. They told us it wasn't our tax money used at the lab. Yes, it was. They told us vaccines. They told us that the vaccinated can't get it. They told us the vaccinated can't transmit it. They told us masks work. They told us 6 feet social distance was based on science. And they told us this was the first virus in history where there's no such thing as natural immunity. They were 0 for 8. And yet they're going to define with some disinformation governance board what we can say, what we can tweet, what we can read, what we can post. You got to be kidding me. As RFK Jr. testified before our committee, never forgot what he said. He said, when you look at history, it is never the good guys who are for censorship. It is always the bad guys, and that's our concern. We need debate. The best way to answer bad speech, wrong speech, stupid speech, crazy speech, even hate speech is more speech. We need the First Amendment. Our committee will continue to move legislation that protects free speech from threats, including threats from abroad. With that, I now recognize our ranking member for his opening statement.
Let's take a quick pause before we listen to the delusional Democrat, Jamie Raskin. I just want to share with you that the reason why I focus so hard on this topic is because if censorship could happen to me, meaning my channel got canceled, I got censored, then anybody here could get censored. And clearly, this is what we are seeing happening in the UK, but with more consequences. Not many people had been following this saga back in 2020, but those who were a part of this journey witnessed the abuse that a lot of us took online, from being deplatformed, demonetized, suspended from Twitter. I mean, the harassment was off the chain, all because you talked about this moon bump. And it got to a point where certain creators refused to talk about this moon bump and self-censored themselves out of fear that they were going to get shut down. This is what had been happening. But it wasn't just Meghan's moon bump. It was other things like the election. If you favored Donald Trump, you get targeted, you get attacked, you get shut down. Boozy was doing it. Any dissenting voices that was not complimentary of Meghan got canceled. And this went on for a few years. So the reason why I won't drop it is because they violated our rights. And what is being discussed in these hearings is exactly what had been going on with this space. And I don't want it to be forgotten because so many of us were harmed by it. And I think it's eye-opening to see what the fruits of their labor was all these years in advocating and funding and supporting all these groups to generate all these so-called safety reports. These two assholes influenced these laws. And I'm so glad that you could hear it for yourself with Congressman Van Drew talking about these globalists and what they had been trying to do. Since 2021, I have been raising the alarm about these two meddling in U.S. politics, undermining our Constitution, and interfering with the 2020 election. Look at how much bullshit these two have suckered so many people into believing and still believing. The way that I see it, for the most part, they were successful. They failed in the United States, but they were partially successful because we have all these countries now pushing to implement these so-called safety bills for the online space. Harry and Meghan have been funding the youth who have been advocating on Capitol Hill and getting shit done. Meanwhile, the unsuspecting and stupid are believing that Meghan is such a failure. Everything is failing. Like today, her so-called Etsy shop or My Shop shut down. Did anybody really believe that she was running that thing? Does anybody believe that she's running As Ever Whatever and this other crap that she's going on about? Everything has been one big distraction. Ask yourself, why do you think certain channels that talk about the nonsense are not affected? But this channel, as well as a couple others who talk about similar topics, are suppressed, are affected. And that's because they don't want you talking about this and they don't want you seeing this. How does that make you feel? They want you talking about the stuff that's going to make you dumb and stupid. And these leftists want to pretend like the past 4 years never happened. So take a listen to Jamie Raskin talk about how this administration, the Trump administration, has been against and the enemy of free speech. If you really listen to what this guy is saying, it literally could be applied to everything that Harry and Meghan say, as well as other radical leftists. They all are singing from the same playbook.
Thank you kindly, Mr. Chairman, and welcome to our witnesses. I imagine that in a hearing about threats to freedom of speech abroad, we might hear from a Russian dissident about Putin's massive violations of political freedom, or the death of Alexei Navalny in prison, or perhaps a Chinese pro-democracy activist about President Xi's attacks on free speech in Hong Kong, Tibet, Xinjiang, or the persecution trial of Jimmy Lai. Or maybe a journalist about the Saudi Crown Prince's assassination of Jamal Khashoggi, the Washington Post writer who demanded freedom from religious persecution and oppression in Saudi Arabia. But no, the dictators of the world have got nothing to fear from this hearing. The Republicans called it to attack our democratic allies in Europe. The star witness is not a human rights leader like Navalny, but a far-right, pro-Putin politician who leads the UK Reform Party, a party that has 4 members out of 650 members in the parliament. He calls England an authoritarian regime, while saying that Vladimir Putin is the world leader he admires the most. Well, this hearing mimics Vice President J.D. Vance, who went to the Munich Security Conference in February. In the first 2 minutes of his speech, whitewashed the world's leading autocratic regimes, proclaiming that the threat that worries him is not Russia. It's not China, he said, but rather it's our European allies. Amazing. Republicans are promoting far-right parties in Europe, like Alternative for Deutschland, Reform UK, and Rassemblement National Français, and ignoring massive repression in Russia, China, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and among all the autocrats of the world. Republicans are vilifying European liberal democracies simply for engaging in the kind of line-drawing exercises that we Americans engage in under our First Amendment with respect to the epidemic of child pornography, protecting children from other harmful content, defamatory speech, online scams and false advertising, and speech inciting riots and imminent lawless action. All forms of speech that the First Amendment does not protect and whose tricky contours must still be drawn by law. We could have a meaningful hearing on this complicated subject, but this hearing is just a drive-by hit against a strong Democratic ally to benefit a Donald Trump sycophant and wannabe. But it's even worse than this. Not only are our colleagues ignoring intensifying repression in the world's dictatorships, they're also trying to distract the world from the attack on freedom taking place right here in America every single day. Americans aren't worried about the EU or the Online Safety Act in the UK. We're not worried about white nationalists not having enough license to incite lynch mobs to set immigrants on fire in their bedrooms. Americans are worried that Donald Trump is working to rewrite and whitewash American history in our museums, our textbooks, and our national parks, to destroy PBS, NPR, and public broadcasting, to ban books in our libraries, and to censor any news stories critical of him by installing political henchmen in private broadcast rooms. Americans know that academic freedom is in danger when the administration cancels and withholds billions of dollars in scientific and medical research funding from American universities, even for urgent life-saving studies about breast cancer or heart attacks, as a way to force schools to impose government orthodoxy on curriculum, hiring, admissions, and any student and faculty speech that MAGA considers politically incorrect. Americans see Trump trying to harass, intimidate, control, and shut down the press like ABC, CBS, NBC, NPR, and PBS. The Republican-controlled FCC essentially blackmailed media companies Skydance and Paramount into agreeing to install a spy, a monitor, a minder, I think the Brits might say, to police CBS news programs to make sure that they are being sufficiently Trumpy in giving us the news in order to get approval of a merger from FCC. Meanwhile, Trump sued 60 Minutes and CBS personally for $20 billion for the frivolous cause of action that he thought an interview with Kamala Harris was edited too favorably, and then walked away with a cool $16 million in a shakedown settlement for his library, all part of a now familiar pattern. When Trump doesn't like the news, he sues the broadcaster and unleashes the FCC on them until they pay up and agree to a government spy stationed in their office. Free speech is so much in danger in the US today that if the government tries to violate our rights, we might not even be able to find a lawyer to defend ourselves because Trump is systematically exacting retribution against law firms that represent anyone on the other side of a case against him. Look, our country loves free speech. We fight for free speech. We fought for free speech, and we know it's in danger when students who are lawfully in the United States are taken off the street and arrested without warrants by masked federal agents in unmarked cars for writing an article or attending a rally that Stephen Miller doesn't like. Free speech is in danger when visitors to our country have their social media accounts screened at the border for any criticism of Donald Trump. Free speech is in danger when To Kill a Mockingbird, The Handmaid's Tale, 1984, and The Kite Runner are banned from our schools and libraries across the country, and even families defending our freedom abroad have to fight for their kids' right to read freely in public schools run by the Department of Defense. Freedom's in danger when the administration tramples the civil service rights of hundreds of thousands of nonpartisan expert civil servants. These civil servants have been protected against political discrimination for more than a century to maintain the excellence and independence of our federal workforce, but they're now being fired simply for doing their jobs, like prosecuting violent criminals and insurrectionists who try to overthrow our government and attack our police officers, or because they honestly gave honest economic information and labor statistics to the public. These honorable civil servants are being fired because they won't be the political hacks Trump demands that they be. When private comments made by federal employees are scrutinized for anti-Trump bias and they can lose their jobs because of it, then we've entered the realm not just of Vladimir Putin, but of Joseph Stalin. Now, Mr. Trump and Mr. Farage both claim they're protectors of free speech, but they only want to protect speech they agree with. In the UK, Mr. Farage is openly promoting the abolition of the Human Rights Act of 1998 to be replaced with a British Bill of Rights that limits the right of free speech to British citizens and legally sanctioned residents. He complains that racist threats against immigrants are not protected free speech, while he proposes to strip migrants, tourists, and perhaps even visiting American congresspeople of any free speech rights at all. I had my own close encounter with that when Mr. Farage and his team presented for more than an hour in a conversation we had about free speech. And after 3 minutes of talking, he cut me off and terminated the meeting because he didn't like what I was saying. That's the kind of free speech he's committed to. There is a free speech crisis in America today, but there's no free speech crisis in Britain. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has not shut down GB News, where Mr. Farage has his own show, just because Mr. Farage has used his airtime to call for banning peaceful protests that he disagrees with. No one has stopped him from going on Russian TV 17 times and saying also and repeating that the one world political leader he most admired was Vladimir Putin, even though Vladimir Putin is a war criminal and a dictator who has regularly interfered in other countries' democratic elections. No one has stopped Mr. Farage from parroting Putin's absurd talking points, like when Farage claimed that NATO, the US and Britain provoked this war in Ukraine. For a man who fashions himself as some kind of a free speech martyr, Mr. Farage seems most at home with the autocrats and dictators of the world who are crushing freedom on earth. Mr. Farage wants to get rid of the Online Safety Act in his country, a law shepherded by the Conservative Party and implemented by the Labor Party, which bans child pornography online, protects children from harmful content, forbids non-consensual pornography and other unlawful content. He should go and advance the positions he's taking here in Congress today in Parliament, which is meeting today, if he's serious about it. To the people of UK who think this Putin-loving free speech imposter and Trump sycophant will protect freedom in your country, come on over to America and see what Trump and MAGA are doing to destroy our freedom, kidnap college students off the street, ban books from our libraries, militarize our police and unleash them against our communities, take over our universities, wreck our professional civil service, and turn the government into a money-making machine for Trump and his family. You might think twice before you let Mr. Farage make Britain great again. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. I would just point out that the encounter that the ranking member had with Mr. Farage was a little different at my recollection than how it was described. And I would also point out that the gentleman alleges there's no free speech in America under President Trump, while his staff member is holding up countless number of articles criticizing the Trump administration. I think that's a little bit of a, well, let's say that's not how I think it actually goes. So, Right Honorable Member of Parliament, Mr. Farage is recognized.
Well, thank you very much indeed. Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Chairman Jordan, for inviting me here today. And it turns out, with news in the last 48 hours, it's been really rather timely. I'm delighted to reacquaint with the charming Mr. Raskin. It was delightful testimony you gave me earlier on with your speech. But hey, that's fine. You can say what you like. I don't care. Because that's what free speech is. And in a sense, this has all been going wrong now for a couple of decades. We've kind of forgotten the Voltairean principles that we'll fight and defend to the death your right to say something that we fundamentally disagree with. That is the absolute foundation, if you think about it, of free speech, of democracy, of living in freedom. It's kind of why we fought 2 world wars at massive, massive cost to defend that very principle for ourselves and for many, many others around the country. And I first became worried about all this with cancel culture. You know, the idea that we can't have this speaker go to a university because some people might be offended by what he or she have to say. It is important to note that there is not a parent in the United Kingdom, and I would guess it's the same for America too, that is not concerned about content their children as minors can find on the internet. Not a single parent that is not concerned about this. But at the moment, we're not finding the right solutions. I do myself begin to think that hardware might be one of the solutions. That laptops, that handsets could be programmed so that many, many apps and many, many services simply aren't available from these devices. But what we've done is to go down the legislative route. And it's extraordinary that, you know, I come from the land of Magna Carta. I come from the land that gave us the mother of parliaments. And it doesn't give me any great joy to be sitting in America and describing the really awful authoritarian situation that we have now sunk into. J.D. Vance did us all a service at the Munich Security Conference back in February this year. He really got this debate up and running, and it's a vital one. We've run on since then. The Online Safety Act was put in place by the last Conservative government. I don't doubt for a minute they're good intentions, but sometimes the road to hell is paved with those good intentions. And we are now where we are. We have a couple of very famous cases. We, of course, have Lucy Connolly, who put out an intemperate tweet after the savage murder of those 3 beautiful young girls, she herself, a mother who had lost a child. It was intemperate, it was wrong, but she removed it 3.5 hours later, sentenced to 31 months in prison. She's now out, having served 40% of the time. I wanted to bring her with me today as living proof of what can go wrong. Sadly, the restrictions that have been put on her banned her from making the trip, which is a very, very great shame. And we, of course, have the extraordinary events that we understood yesterday of Graham Linehan, comedy writer, comedic writer, and he put out some tweets months ago when he was in Arizona, and months later he arrives at Heathrow Airport to be met by 5 armed police. Armed police, not a big deal in the USA, a very big deal in the United Kingdom. 5 of them. And he was arrested and taken away for questioning. He's not even a British citizen. He's an Irish citizen. This could happen to any American man or woman that goes to Heathrow that has said things online that the British government and British police don't like. It is a potentially big threat to tech bosses, to many, many others. This legislation we've got will damage trade between our countries, threaten free speech across the West because of the knock-on roll-out effects of this legislation from us or from the European Union. So I've come today as well to be a klaxon, to say to you, don't allow, piece by piece, this to happen here in America. And you will be doing us and yourselves and all freedom-loving people a favour if your politicians and your businesses said to the British government, you've simply got this wrong. At what point did we become North Korea? Well, I think the Irish comedy writer found that out 2 days ago at Heathrow Airport. This is a genuinely worrying, concerning and shocking situation. And I thank you for the opportunity to come here today.
Thank you, Mr. Well said. Thank you, Mr. Farage.
Such a fraud.